So it's April 3rd and Liberation Day is currently still underway. Donald Trump's, of course, praised for the day that he unleashed a series of tariffs on countries all over the world. India, of course, being hit by a 27% tariff, and of course, big questions about what it means for the Indian economy, also for countries all over the world as they grapple with the consequences of what Donald Trump has slapped on them today. Sitting with me, of course, are Shailendra Bhatnagar, of course, who is a chief analyst for Business Today, and of course, Geeta Mohan, foreign affairs editor for India Today. So we're also going to sit down, have a chat about what exactly the Trump tariffs mean for the Indian economy. Let me turn to Shailendra sir to begin with. Could you tell us a little bit about where the markets are right now, what the reaction has been, people you're talking to about the Trump tariffs, how are people taking it?
So it might be Liberation Day for the United States, but what they've done is they've erected a great tariff wall.
Yes, the
across their
Great
economy.
Wall.
So that's the first thing I must say. So let's break this up into two parts. When Mr. Trump announced these tariffs, the US markets had closed. For the moment, the US futures are down dramatically. And the rest of the global world has reacted. Asia was down because Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, and large parts of Asia, which is China, of course, and Vietnam, have been hit badly. These are amongst the 5 largest trading partners of the US, amongst the top 10. Right? EU and UK have been not that badly hit. Everybody's been hit. Somebody's worse, somebody's bad. So Asia is badly off because it was the biggest trading partner in terms of exports to the US. Within Asia, we are the best, which means we've fallen the least. We've fallen, but we haven't had it so badly as to how the US, other markets have reacted. That's mainly because pharma has been spared, right? And India is the pharmacy of the world.
Yes.
So all pharma stocks and the main index in the pharma space are up and up dramatically. So defensive markets within the stock market segment have done phenomenally well. What has also happened is that the early knee-jerk, I mean, one was expecting that this would be dramatically inimical to the Indian economy. It hasn't been as bad because we may be at 27%, but China is at 34%. Some parts of Asia, such as Vietnam, are at 46%. So we may have got a deal which is bad. It could have been worse.
But can I come in here? Shell, either way, whether it's China or India or any other country, we're looking at a 50% tariff that America has levied against those countries that have much higher.
Yes.
So we are about 54, they did a 26. Give us the mystery behind 26, 27 as well. What happened there? Were they bumbling? Did they go wrong?
I think you might need to explain to our viewers what the 26-27 discrepancy was.
Ahead.
Well, just very simply that when Donald Trump made his presentation, he brought out this very nice board and said that there's a 26% reciprocal tariff on India. And then when you look at the annexure to his executive order, it says 27%. So lots of confusion about
what happened there?
Whether there was an intern involved somewhere or...
was there an intern who got it wrong?
Yeah.
Interns at the White House are a very difficult thing to talk about. You might know about it, but I'm sure you know. So 26 or 27, let's stay with 27. I think there was an issue there. But like I said, we've got the best part of the stick. We haven't been hit that badly. China, which has a huge trade surplus with the US, mostly to the tune of about $300 billion. I'll have to check that number. Is the worst hit, including Vietnam. Remember what the Chinese have done very smartly is that they've moved their Chinese factories to Vietnam. So you have a Chinese product made in Vietnam shipped to the US. So the US has sent a very clear message that we know what's happening and you need to rectify that. So that is one. Secondly, Bangladesh has been hit worse than us. Both Bangladesh and Vietnam are very big garment exporters. And all our textile stocks are up. So if there are two winners, there is the pharma and textiles. What's been worst off is IT.
Auto?
Auto, not much because we don't export much to the US except for Tata Motors, which exports a large part of its Jaguar Land Rover vehicles to the US.
Okay, why IT then?
IT very simply because of rising tariffs, companies in the US will face a lot of problems in terms of demand which is falling. Because see, a tariff is a tax. You are paying 25%,
That is true.
26% extra for the same service, right? Which essentially means any US company will have to do something to its cost structure to absorb that. Either it will cut down the cost or it will pass on the cost to the customer. In either case, demand will slow. If demand will slow, then obviously companies will face pressure. The first thing that will get hit is IT costs. So that's why our IT companies, which have about 50 to about 70% of their revenue coming from the US, being impacted negatively as a knee-jerk reaction. Over time, 6, 7, 8 months, whenever there has been a US recession, they have spent on IT to overcome those and get in efficiencies. And therefore, IT will react positively after 6 months. But pain in IT today and celebration in textiles and in pharma as far as our markets are concerned.
Understood. Hidemon, let me ask
Very
you.
interesting.
Let me ask you one question on some of the strategic implications we've heard of these talks. It's all across Asia. I think there is. Sher was mentioning that there's a big question about how badly Asian economies have been hit, and the big question for a lot of Asian economies is that look, China is undisputably our largest trading partner. The United States we used to rely upon for security, but now it seems like Donald Trump isn't interested in showing up to fight other people's wars. He isn't interested in giving you access to market economy. Isn't China the only option? Don't we all have to now make peace with China and work closely with them?
Aren't we already doing that? We are making
Right,
peace with
right.
China. We still have Chinese troops at the border, on very much on our side.
As Rahul Gandhi reminded us in Parliament today.
Yes,
Yes.
as Rahul Gandhi reminded us, and we'll play that bite also.
We raise a matter of urgent public importance. Speaker Sir, it's a known fact that China is sitting on 4,000 square kilometers of our territory. I was shocked some time back to see that our foreign secretary was cutting a cake with the Chinese ambassador. The question is, what exactly is happening to this territory? 4,000 किलोमीटर हैं, 4,000 किलोमीटर चाइना ने ले लिए हैं और हमारे फॉरेन सेक्रेटरी उनके एम्बेसडर के साथ केक काट रहे हैं। 20 जवान शहीद हुए थे, उनकी शहादत की सेलिब्रेशन हो रही है केक काटकर। अब हम नॉर्मलसी के खिलाफ नहीं हैं, मगर नॉर्मलसी से पहले स्टेटस को होना चाहिए। हमारी जमीन हमें वापस मिलनी चाहिए। We should get our land back.
But the thing is that at this point in time, at this juncture, India is being realistic.
Yes.
So what is India doing? It's engaging China, but look at BIMSTEC. It's not just engaging China, it's saying we are the alternative too. And which is what and we're not as big as China, but India is going to project. So Prime Minister Modi at BIMSTEC, Shashank, we should be focusing on what the conversation on trade and connectivity is going to look like in the next 2 days. We were speaking with Umesh Pandey, who represents the Thai government when it comes to trade. And he was saying that the big push is going to be on how the BIMSTEC countries need to now come together, which is Asia, South Asia and Southeast Asia, to counter reciprocal tariffs of the US, because these Southeast Asian countries are going to be impacted, which certainly includes Bangladesh. And there is a meeting between India and Bangladesh on the sidelines of BIMSTEC. Prime Minister Modi is going to hold a lot of on the sidelines meetings, beginning with the Thai Prime Minister. This is going to be a very interesting one where India is going to make that big push at every important multilateral.
Right.
This is your moment, not in terms of the adversity that you're going to face in markets. That is going to happen, no matter how you look at it. But again, one has to see whether if America has the absorption power.
Yeah.
Can it absorb, how much losses can it absorb, and high price or skyrocketing prices can it absorb?
Right.
I was speaking to a few people. They said, even if they do a 6-month window where Trump is able to absorb, maybe they'll be better off. But if not,
Right.
then you will see them crumble. It's either America crumble or we crumble.
So basically,
first.
it's about who folds first, who blinks
falls
first, in
first,
that
who
sense.
blinks
No, it's very interesting. But I wanted to ask.
And that's the window we have for the BTA
Yes.
to happen.
See, essentially, what has happened is that after 30, 40 years of intense globalization, a lot of countries are looking inwards. You know, the flag bearer of capitalism and globalization has always been Wall Street and America. They have exported a lot of that across the world, and to my understanding, it's been a happier place till about 5-7 years ago, when the ills of both capitalism and globalization have been brought to fore.
Yeah.
Now, all of us,
Especially with the conflicts.
yes. So, and especially with the conflicts, they come at a time when all the warts and all of capitalism and globalization have come to the fore. So a lot of countries are negotiating bilaterals, as you would know, UK with India, US with India, even China in India, and so many other states within each other. So my understanding is that global growth will slow. All those companies and all those countries who depend on domestic growth, like us, we are not, the reason why we are not as badly off today is that exports as a percentage of total GDP in the Indian setup is less. China is worse.
Right.
Japan is worse. Plus, they don't, Japan and South Korea don't have as much robust markets in terms of sheer size and growth compared with India. Therefore, we are relatively well off, and we had corrected very sharply.
Yeah.
So there are lots of ifs and buts.
Right.
Plus, we'll have to see how Wall Street reacts tonight before we have a final picture.
Understood. Could I ask you one question about the economic relationship now between India and China? What we've seen, of course, in the last couple of weeks is reports that the Indian government is, of course, thinking of loosening the screws on more Chinese investments coming into India, manufacturing and so on. Could you talk a little bit about what you're hearing on that side? Because increasingly the sense is that we track trade reasonably closely, and the sense is that all these countries are now looking at each other and saying, like even the Europeans, for example, the Indians and the Europeans are looking at each other and
Let's
saying,
do business.
sure, 6 months ago we were living in a very different world. We could agree to disagree, we won't do a trade deal. But now we're faced in a world that no, we have to do a trade deal.
Yeah.
So the question I have is, when it comes to the China question, India's obviously had its concerns about that trade deficit with the Chinese, how China kneecapping Indian manufacturing. Now we're saying that, okay, we might need Chinese manufacturing anyway. What was your sense of this?
I'll first let Geeta answer that. I'm not much of a Chinese watcher, but let's hear to what Geeta has to say.
No, I do see a massive increase. There is going to be opening up of, it already has started, it has begun, and we're going to look at a lot. But in terms of competition, you are going to see the markets flooded with with Chinese automobiles. BYD is already taken on Tesla when it comes to, or overtaken the sales when it comes to EVs. And you're seeing more and more of BYD in India. I was, there was an entire delegation, American delegation, top officials who were here, China hands, okay? And can't give out names, but we were having this off the record, and they said, how does one look at China and countering China? And I was just telling them this, that you see, and Tesla had not even considered India because of the problems. And I said, you're way behind the curve.
Absolutely.
China is way ahead of the curve. And I said, just go into the streets of Delhi and look at EV vehicles and see how many BYDs you can spot now.
Yeah.
In our parking garage in the building as well.
Right?
I haven't seen any. I'm going to go down today and
and Tesla is not even made in it.
Yeah.
I said, forget about everything else. The world does not work on just how many troops are at the border. The world works on what's the numbers, what's the GDP to, how is it adding to your GDP? How is it adding to your economy? And you guys have not figured that out. And that was not this administration. That was the previous administration. So we are talking about back then living in a land where they were not looking at things. I'd say Trump, as crazy as he might sound, is more practical and realistic in how he wants to deal with China. I was at the Oval Office when Modi was there, and I asked him this. I said, if you want to take on China, why are you being so tough on India? And you know what he said? Who wants to be tough on China? We want to do business. We want to do business with China. We want to do business with India. So anybody who thinks that America, that we should be fighting or countering China by engaging the West and that, America is engaging China.
Yes.
So forget about, I mean, these questions that we keep asking ourselves time and again, Shashank, that, oh, how are we going to do this? Be realistic.
So, can I ask one question though on what happens for the Indian economy going ahead in the future? There has been a lot of conversation about Donald Trump being this sort of useful extremist in the sense that he's come and put a gun to the head of the Indian policymakers and said that, look,
Has he not?
yeah,
Really?
but that's the question. So there was that great phrase that Indians are reformers not by conviction but by compulsion. We
Yes.
only do it when there's a gun to our head.
Yeah.
Do you think that there is a reasonable prospect of the government of India looking at this and saying that, look, tariffs will need to go down, quality control orders are stifling production? What is your sense of
Have
that?
we been arm twisted to the right path?
Yes.
So I'll answer this in two segments. One, we only and only reform when we have a gun to our head.
There you go.
Right? So in 1991, there was absolutely a closed economy in terms of the license raj. You couldn't set up a cement plant, you couldn't set up a steel plant, you couldn't set up fresh auto capacity, you couldn't import anything unless the government agreed with you, right? You can do all that now, but the bureaucracy is so stifling that it is preventing the horses from running. We are back at Hindu rate of growth. You won't know this, but
No, I'm aware.
but see,
3.5%.
yes,
Yeah.
now that 3.5 is 5.5 or 6.5. You add inflation to it, plus the size of the economy has grown. So my fear is that we let go of these important events in life because our domestic markets are large, right? We will make a hue and cry out of it for 3, 4, 5, 6 days. Markets will start rising up again, and then everything will be fine. No industrialist worth his weight has set up any fresh capacity to speak of except for 1 or 2 business groups.
True.
What we have done is, because of the NCLT, we've bought cheaper assets that were in pain because of the NPA problem. Plus, we've always had this fear of Chinese
Non-performing
imports.
assets for
Yeah.
people who don't understand
Yes.
this.
Plus, what has happened is that every industrialist fears China. Chinese imports आ जाएंगे, मैं क्यों factory लगाऊं? And at the same time, one independent event that has happened is that middle class incomes have stagnated. Therefore, you really have no spending as such happening in the economy, which can be talked about or predicted for an industrialist to set up a couple of factories. Worse, whatever savings were there have been invested in the markets. So there is very little money
Spending
that
cash,
is,
right.
yeah, there is very
Disposable
little
income.
consumer spending, discretionary consumer spending happening.
Right.
Yes, it is happening, but it is at the level of Geeta. You know, Tesla, she wants to buy 70 lakh rupees ki gaadi. You know, Maruti is facing problems in selling its products.
Right.
Not BMW or Mercedes. They've already met their targets.
Right.
So the middle class is getting squeezed, and it's the upper echelons of the society that are doing really well.
Right, exactly.
They never were ever worried about recession or such things. You know, you have a headline every other day, a 150 crore rupee flat has been sold.
Right.
Yes.
Right? There is a problem in selling a 2 crore rupee flat.
Understood. So the point you're making is, I think there was a great report that came out, I think Bloom put it out, which was, that we essentially live in 3 Indias. The
Yes.
top, the India number 1 is a country of 100 million people that lives at the level of Mexico. The next 200 million is the emerging middle class. And then, of course, there's the bottom billion, which doesn't have any spending power whatsoever. So we live essentially in 3 different countries. And what's happened is that India number 2, which you were relying upon to grow, has been hit really badly after
Absolutely.
the pandemic and demonetization and everything. So the problem is that we're stuck where we've juiced out the top 150 million, and then we need the next 400 million to perform, and they're not. And that's the big problem for the Indian economy, for which you might need reform. but it remains to be seen whether the government will deliver on that. But that was the conversation that we've had so far on the big takeaways from the Trump tariffs, how they'll impact India, how the markets have performed, what the strategic implications are, and also what will happen perhaps tonight with the reaction of
Also,
the
it's
American
27%,
markets.
not 26.
27%, not 26. Just in case if you're going to talk to your friends and family about it.
If I may add just one more.
Yes, please.
So, despite all the short-term noise that you are seeing, all that people in your age group need to do is continue investing in Indian markets. They will see you through over the next 5, 7, 10 years.
Interesting.
And see, there were 3 negatives that were in front of us over the last 6 months or so. Donald Trump came in, we did not know what he would do. That is out of the way. Markets have reacted positively, relatively positively to this development, and there are people who are worse off than us.
Right.
So in this whole conundrum, we will be better off. And the markets have corrected sharply. To cut the long story short, if you haven't invested so far, please do so now.
Right.
Shashank, that was for you.
Yes, no, but actually, it was. I was thinking of what Sharid was saying. I was thinking about that phrase, of course, from Three Idiots. "Hum dukhi the, lekin humse aur kai aur log dukhi the." So that's the state.
I
of the
don't know
markets.
who are the 3 idiots, whether it's the movie that's being talked about or
It's just the fact that we are 3 over here.
No. Nothing meant by it. Nothing
3
meant by
aces.
it. But
three
nothing.
aces.
Nothing meant by it. But thank you so much for joining us here on India Global to just break down Liberation Day, the Trump tariffs, and the impact on the Indian economy and the world economy. Thanks again.